At 2:11 a.m., a single father realized the emergency calls were not being ignored. They were being delayed on purpose. No alarms went off, no rules were broken, and no one would die on paper. But somewhere in the city, someone would die waiting. The operations floor of the Emergency Coordination Center was quiet in the way only night shifts ever were, too quiet to feel safe. Rows of desks sat empty, chairs pushed in with the neatness of abandonment. Overhead lights were dimmed to half power, casting tired shadows across polished floors. Evan Reed sat alone at Station C. Was the desk no one asked for. Closest to the server wall, farthest from the supervisor's glass office. During the day, it belonged to trainees. At night, it belonged to whoever didn't complain. Evan never complained. The dashboard glowed green. Call volume within range. Average response times acceptable. System health optimal. On paper, it was a good night. The night shift had been posted again that week. 16 days, 23 views, 0 takers. Too isolating, people said. Too heavy. Too many hours listening to emergencies without seeing how they ended. Evan took it anyway. He always did. Because the night shift paid 12% more, and 12% meant groceries without counting coins. 12% meant Lucy could stay in her school. 12% meant the inhaler in the bathroom cabinet could be replaced before it ran out. "Daddy," Lucy had asked that morning, tying her shoes with fierce concentration, "why do you always pick the hardest jobs?" Evan had smiled, kissed the top of her head, and said something about schedules. The truth was harder. The truth was that the easy jobs were already gone. At 2:11 a.m., Evan noticed the delay. It wasn't dramatic, no flashing lights, no alerts, just a small discrepancy, one he caught because he had stared at the same data long enough for patterns to settle in his bones. A non-priority medical call, logged, classified, routed, dispatch time, 93 seconds slower than the rolling average. Evan leaned forward and pulled up the raw event log, bypassing the summarized view. The dashboard stayed green. According to the system, nothing was wrong. Another call followed minutes later. Similar category, similar location. This one took 108 seconds longer. Evan glanced around the room. No supervisors, no analysts, no one watching him look more closely than he was supposed to. The night shift ran on trust. Trust that nothing would go wrong, and trust that no one would ask questions if it did. Around midnight, his phone had buzzed in his pocket. He'd stepped into the break alcove and checked the message. Mrs. Alvarez, the neighbor who stayed with Lucy on nights like this. There was a photo attached. Lucy asleep on the couch, hair spread across a pillow too big for her. A math workbook lay open on her chest. One problem, half finished. Her stuffed fox, retired, she insisted, was tucked under her arm. Below the photo was a voice message. "Hi, Daddy," Lucy whispered. "Mrs. Alvarez said I could stay up until you texted, but I got sleepy. I hope your work is okay. If someone calls for help, I hope someone answers them. I love you." Evan listened to it 3 times. He saved it and returned to Station C. Now, at 2:11 a.m., the message felt heavier. He opened a comparison window, raw input versus processed routing. The system categorized calls using a complex matrix. Keywords, caller history, geographic data, available units. All certified, all approved, all designed to be fair. The system wasn't malfunctioning, it was following instructions. That was what unsettled him. He scrolled through recent policy updates until he found it. Buried in a routine memo most people skimmed. Priority threshold optimization to reduce over-dispatch. Optimization. The word looked harmless sitting there. Evan filtered the data again, this time by zone. The delays weren't random, they clustered. Certain neighborhoods waited longer. Not enough to violate service-level agreements, not enough to trip alarms, not enough to show up in averages. On the dashboard, the city looked efficient. In the raw logs, it looked uneven. 90 seconds, 100 seconds. Time that meant nothing to reports. Time that meant everything to a body running out of air. Evan leaned back, the hum of the servers suddenly louder. He imagined a kitchen floor, a bathroom tile, a narrow hallway where someone waited, while a calm voice on the phone promised help was on the way. No one would say the system failed. They would say it worked as designed. He checked the approval chain. Department heads, legal, risk. Everyone had signed. No one had written the word people, only metrics, variance, acceptable delay. Evan sat still. He could stop here. He could log out at 7, ride the train home, make Lucy breakfast, walk her to school, pretend he hadn't seen what he had seen. That was what the system expected. That was what everyone else had done. He thought of Lucy's question from earlier that week. What happens if someone asks for help and nobody listens? He had told her someone always listens. At 2:11 a.m., Evan Reed realized the truth was more complicated. Someone was listening. They just weren't in a hurry. He opened a blank document, not a report, not yet. Just a place to write things down. Outside, the city slept, unaware that seconds were being quietly reassigned. Inside the emergency coordination center, the lights stayed green, calm, convincing. Evan Reed sat alone at a desk no one wanted and made a decision that did not look heroic from the outside. He decided to keep looking. And once you truly look at a system like this, you can never unsee what it is built to do. Evan did not file a report, not yet. Reports were loud things. They demanded answers, created meetings, and invited people who knew how to smooth rough edges until nothing sharp remained. Evan had learned that systems did not respond well to surprise. They defended themselves first, asked questions later. What he needed was certainty. He duplicated the raw logs into a private workspace, careful to preserve timestamps and access trails. Every click left a trace. He made sure each one was boring, defensible, and impossible to misinterpret. At 2:37 a.m., another call arrived. Chest pain, male, mid-40s, residential address. The dashboard labeled it non-priority medical. The algorithm's confidence score was high. No keywords triggered escalation. No history flagged the address as high risk. Dispatch delay, 104 seconds. Evan watched the seconds tick by. He imagined the man on the other end of the line, maybe sitting, maybe already on the floor, listening to a calm voice saying help was coming. He imagined the space between reassurance and arrival stretching just a little too long. The unit dispatched. The system recorded success. Evan wrote the number down. By 3 a.m., he had a pattern. Not a dramatic one. No spike sharp enough to wake supervisors. Just a quiet clustering of delays that behaved too consistently to be coincidence. He filtered by zone. The same neighborhoods. He filtered by hour. The same stretch of night. He filtered by call type. Medical, welfare checks, domestic concerns. Nothing violent. Nothing that demanded urgency. Just enough to be postponed. At 3:12 a.m., Evan stood and stretched. The room felt smaller now, the air heavier. Green lights glowed above each station, steady and confident, like a system pleased with itself. He walked past the supervisor's glass office, empty. The overnight supervisor role had been temporarily consolidated months ago, responsibilities redistributed, accountability diluted, optimization again. Evan returned to his desk and opened the policy document for the third time. Priority threshold, optimization to reduce over-dispatch. The language was precise and clinical. It spoke of efficiency, of protecting limited resources, of reducing unnecessary strain. It did not speak of time. It never said delay. It never said wait. It never said die. It said acceptable variance. Evan highlighted the definition. A range wide enough to hide a body. His phone vibrated. The school. Lucy. His chest tightened instantly as he answered. "It's nothing serious," the administrator said quickly. "Lucy had a minor breathing episode during recess. She used her inhaler and she's fine. We just wanted to inform you." Evan exhaled slowly. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you for calling." When the line went dead, Evan stood motionless for a moment, his hands still resting against the wall. Lucy was fine, tonight, but he understood now how thin the margin was between fine and too late. He returned to Station C at 3:28 a.m. He ran a routine query, one he was authorized to access, one that wouldn't raise flags. He compared the current configuration to the archived version from before the policy update. The difference was small. One modifier, a weighting adjustment applied under specific conditions, call density, unit availability, and historical response performance by zone. The system had learned. It had learned where delays were tolerated. Evan felt something cold settle in his stomach. This wasn't an error. It was a choice repeated often enough to become invisible. He saved the comparison. At 3:41 a.m., footsteps echoed across the floor. Marcus Hale, the overnight operations manager, stopped beside Station C with a paper cup of coffee. Marcus was competent, careful, and tired in a way that came from years of preventing problems rather than fixing them. Quiet night? Marcus asked. Depends how you define quiet, Evan said. Marcus glanced at the dashboard. Looks good. It does. Marcus leaned against the desk. You're still here every night, he said. Most people burn out faster. Someone has to cover it. Marcus hesitated. Just don't dig too deep. Night shifts mess with your head. You start seeing patterns that aren't there. Or, Evan said calmly, you start seeing patterns because they are. Marcus sighed. The policy went through legal, city council, risk. If there's a problem, it's not ours to solve at 3 in the morning. What if the problem is time? Evan asked. What if we're shaving minutes where minutes decide outcomes? Marcus straightened. This job isn't about saving everyone, he said. It's about running a system that works most of the time. And the rest of the time? Marcus looked away. Walk your shift, log the night, go home. At 4:02 a.m., a welfare check came in. Elderly female, no response inside apartment. Neighbor concerned. Dispatch delay, 119 seconds. Evan closed his eyes briefly. He had lived this once already. 3 years earlier, when Lucy's mother collapsed in their bathroom, the ambulance arrived in time to pronounce her dead. Time had mattered then too, just not enough to change the outcome. He opened a new folder on his screen. He labeled it with the date, nothing else. He began saving everything. Logs, comparisons, policy excerpts, access trails. He did not change the system. He did not override a setting. He did not make a sound. He simply documented the truth in a way that could not be undone. At 4:46 a.m., Evan leaned back, exhaustion settling into his bones. Dawn was still hours away. The system continued to run, calls continued to route, green lights continued to glow. From the outside, nothing had changed. But Evan understood now that silence was not neutrality. Silence was participation. He glanced at the folder again, then at the policy. There was a path forward, narrow, procedural, dangerous in a quiet way. One that did not involve shouting or heroics. One that involved forcing the system to look at what it had learned to ignore. Evan did not take that step yet, but he knew exactly where it led. And once you know where a road ends, every step toward it becomes a choice. By the third night, Evan stopped pretending this was coincidence. The numbers were too consistent, the pattern too polite. The system never crossed a line, only hovered close enough to it that no one felt compelled to look twice. That was the design. Evan arrived early and logged in at Station C before the lights fully dimmed. The room smelled faintly of burnt coffee and disinfectant. Somewhere in the building, a printer hummed without purpose. The dashboard lit up green, always green. At 11:48 p.m., he ran the same checks he always did. Call volume, unit availability, system health. Everything reported normal. At 12:06 a.m., the first delay appeared. Non-priority medical. Zone 14. Delay, 98 seconds. Evan didn't react. He wrote it down. At 12:41 a.m., another. Welfare check, Zone 14 again. Delay, 111 seconds. He leaned back and exhaled slowly through his nose. The system wasn't hiding anymore. It was repeating itself. He pulled up the audit trail for the policy update. Every approval, every comment, every quiet digital nod that had turned theory into instruction. The language was careful, scrubbed clean of consequence, resource balancing, efficiency under load, risk mitigation, no mention of who bore the risk. At 1:09 a.m., footsteps echoed behind him. Elaine Park, senior operations analyst, stopped beside his desk. Elaine didn't work nights unless something had gone wrong. She had the posture of someone used to being listened to. "You're here a lot," she said. "Someone has to be," Evan replied. Elaine glanced at his screen. "Everything okay?" "Yes," Evan said, meaning nothing is broken. Elaine studied him for a moment longer than necessary. "You know," she said, "night shifts can mess with perspective. You start thinking you're the only one paying attention." Evan met her eyes. "What if that's true?" Elaine smiled thinly. "Then that's a problem." "For who?" Evan asked. "For everyone," she said, and walked away. At 1:37 a.m., Evan's phone buzzed. Lucy. A voice message this time, sent too late for bedtime. "Daddy," Lucy whispered. "I couldn't sleep. Mrs. Alvarez let me use the big couch." I was thinking about your work. If someone needs help and it takes a long time, is that because no one cares? Evan closed his eyes. No, he whispered to the empty room. Sometimes it's because caring was turned into math. He saved the message. At 2:02 a.m., a call arrived that made his hands still. Chest pain, female, late 60s, zone 14. The system labeled it non-priority. Evan watched the dispatch timer tick upward. 90 seconds, 100, 112. He felt his jaw tighten. The unit was finally sent. Outcome pending. Evan did not intervene. He couldn't. The system was doing exactly what it had been told to do. At 2:19 a.m., he opened the compliance manual and scrolled until he found the clause he had been circling for days. Internal audit trigger. Credible evidence of disproportionate impact. The language was dense, discouraging by design. A path that required documentation, patience, and a willingness to be isolated. Initiating it would not fix anything immediately. It would only make the system uncomfortable. Evan understood systems well enough now to know what happened to discomfort. They pushed back. At 2:31 a.m., Marcus Hale appeared beside Station C, coffee in hand. "You're still digging," Marcus said quietly. "I'm still working," Evan replied. Marcus set the cup down. "You're new. Let me give you some advice." Evan waited. "Don't create problems that aren't there." Evan looked at him. "What if the problem is that we've decided they aren't?" Marcus's expression hardened. "The policy was approved. It's legal. It's within tolerance." "Tolerable to who?" Evan asked. Marcus lowered his voice. "This job isn't about fixing the world. It's about making sure the system survives the night." "And the people inside it?" Evan said. Marcus straightened. "Walk your shift. Log your hours. Go home." The words landed heavier than Marcus intended. They were the same words Evan had heard at other jobs, other systems, other nights. Keep your head down. Don't ask questions. Be grateful. At 3:04 a.m., Evan received a system message. Reminder: unauthorized data analysis may result in disciplinary review. It was automated, impersonal, perfectly timed. Evan felt the pressure close in, not as fear, but as clarity. This was the line, not the one the system advertised, the real one. At 3:17 a.m., the outcome updated. Zone 14 call, patient transported, condition critical. Evan stared at the word critical until it blurred. He did not know the ending, he only knew the waiting. At 3:29 a.m., Evan opened a new document. He titled it carefully. Personal notes, preliminary observations. Not a report, not yet. He wrote without emotion. Times, zones, policy references, approval chains. He removed adjectives. Left only facts. At 4:01 a.m., the building settled into its deepest quiet. Even the servers seemed to hum more softly. Evan leaned back, exhausted. He could still stop. He could delete the file, forget the names, accept that this was how large systems protected themselves. But he thought of Lucy's voice. Is it because no one cares? Evan knew the answer now. People cared. They just cared in ways that were easier to measure than to feel. He saved the document. Outside, the city slept. Inside, the system continued to run, calm and convinced of its own fairness. Evan Reed sat alone at Station C and crossed the first line, not by acting, but by refusing to look away. And once you refuse that, the rest is only a matter of time. By 6:18 a.m., the room no longer belonged to the night. Screens brightened, chairs filled, voices returned, low, purposeful, pretending nothing important had happened while the city slept. Morning staff moved with the confidence of people who assumed the system had done its job. Evan stayed at Station C. He could have logged out early. No one would have questioned it. The night report could have been routine, forgettable. He chose not to. At 6:27 a.m., a calendar notification appeared on his screen. Mandatory check-in, operations review. Location, conference room, B-time, 6:45 a.m. No agenda, no explanation. Conference room B was glass-walled and too clean, a space designed to make difficult conversations feel temporary. Evan arrived early and sat near the end of the table, hands folded, eyes on the reflection of the city waking up outside. Marcus Hale entered first, then Elaine Park. A woman Evan didn't recognize followed. HR, he guessed, from the tablet held like a shield. "Let's keep this short," Marcus said, closing the door. Evan nodded. Elaine didn't sit. "We've noticed you've been spending a lot of time in the logs." "I monitor the system," Evan replied. "That's not the same as analyzing it," the HR woman said gently. "Claire Thompson," Evan met her gaze. "I only access what I'm authorized to see," Claire smiled. "Authorization isn't the same as necessity." Marcus cleared his throat. "Evan, you're new. You haven't seen what happens when people push against processes they don't fully understand." "I understand the delays," Evan said, "and where they're concentrated." Elaine folded her arms. "Those delays are within tolerance." "Tolerable to who?" Evan asked. Silence. Claire tapped her tablet. "This isn't about blame, it's about alignment. Your role is operational continuity. And if continuity causes harm?" Elaine's jaw tightened. "That's not your call." Marcus leaned forward. "Look, no one is accusing you of anything, but creating friction helps no one." "Silence helps who?" Evan asked. Marcus sighed. "This job isn't about fixing the system. It's about keeping it running." Evan looked at the glass wall, at people passing by with coffee cups and badges. "Running toward what?" Elaine straightened. "Don't make problems where there aren't any." The meeting ended without a raised voice. That was the warning. Evan logged out at 7:04 a.m. and walked into a morning that felt undeservedly calm. On the train home, he stood gripping the rail, replaying the conversation until the words lost their edges. Alignment, tolerance, continuity. At home, Lucy was at the table eating cereal, still in her pajamas. "Daddy," she said, smiling, "you're back early." He knelt to her level. "Different schedule today." She studied his face. "Did something bad happen?" "No," Evan said, then corrected himself. "Not yet." After walking Lucy to school, Evan didn't go home. He went to the small library branch 2 blocks away. He sat at a public computer and searched the city's compliance portal. One phrase: internal audit trigger. The page loaded slowly, as if reluctant. The process was dense, discouraging, designed to prevent impulsive complaints and reward people who documented carefully enough to survive retaliation. At the bottom, a warning: initiation of audit review may result in administrative leave pending investigation. Administrative leave meant unpaid. It meant rent notices. It meant choosing between groceries and prescriptions. Evan printed the checklist and folded it into his jacket. That afternoon, his phone rang. "Marcus." "Everything settled?" Marcus asked. "Yes," Evan replied. "Good. You're reassigned tonight." "To where?" "Station D." Evan closed his eyes. Station D was visible, brighter, closer to supervisors, where people were placed when they needed to be watched. "I'll be there," Evan said. At 9:42 p.m., he logged in at Station D. Conversations floated around him. Laughter, complaints about traffic, normal things. The screens were the same. The pressure was not. At 10:11 p.m., an email arrived. "Please remember all analytical inquiries should be routed through operations during business hours." Elaine flexibility, dressed up as instruction. At 12:03 a.m., a call came in. Welfare check. Zone 31. Delay. 116 seconds. Evan logged it. At 12:41 a.m., Elaine appeared behind him. "Better lighting up here," she said. "Yes," Evan replied. "You don't want to be known as difficult," she added quietly. "That follows people." "So does conscience," Evan said. Elaine walked away. At 1:28 a.m., a message popped up. "Conference room C now. Claire, HR." The room was smaller, no glass, no windows. Claire stood alone. "We're concerned about your stress levels," she said. "Parents carry things differently." Evan said nothing. "We can move you to day coverage," she continued. "Less exposure." "Less pay," Evan replied. "Yes," she said softly, "but less risk." "Risk to who?" Claire hesitated. "To you." "And the system?" Claire didn't answer. Before he left, she added, "Your daughter's school is in one of the zones you have been reviewing." The words stayed with him as he returned to his desk. At 2:07 a.m., another call. Zone 31 again, same delay, same green light. Evan opened the folder he had created days earlier. He added new timestamps, new notes. At 2:46 a.m., his phone vibrated. "Lucy, can't sleep. Are you okay?" Evan stepped into the alcove and called her. "I'm here," he said. "Daddy," she whispered, "when people ask for help, is it bad if the door opens slow?" "Yes," Evan said. "Sometimes it is." "Then why would anyone make it slow?" Evan stared at the wall. "Because they think no one will notice." Lucy was quiet. "You notice." "Yes," Evan said. "I do." When the call ended, Evan returned to Station D. He opened the audit checklist again. He read it slowly. Evidence, documentation, credible harm. At 3:01 a.m., Evan understood something clearly for the first time. He wasn't being warned because he was wrong. He was being warned because he was close. He didn't initiate the audit yet, but he knew he would. And once you know that, every delay stops feeling neutral. The system kept running. The lights stayed green. Evan Reed kept his head down and his eyes open. Pressure didn't arrive as force. It arrived as politeness. At 9:58 p.m., Evan's schedule updated automatically. Shift adjustment, effective immediately. Assignment, Station D. Reason, coverage optimization. Station D again, visible, monitored, close enough to overhear conversations that were never meant for him. Evan acknowledged the change and said nothing. At 10:14 p.m., an email followed. Please remember that analytical review outside defined thresholds should be avoided during overnight operations. Operations avoided, not prohibited, not corrected, avoided. The language of systems that didn't want fingerprints. Evan logged in. The screens were the same, the data flowed the same, but he felt the difference immediately. The way supervisors glanced longer, the way his keystrokes felt louder than they should have. At 11:07 p.m., a call came in. Medical, non-priority, Zone 22. Dispatch delay, 102 seconds. Still green, still acceptable. Evan logged it. At 11:49 p.m., Elaine passed behind him, coffee in hand. "You're adjusting well," she said. "Yes," Evan replied. "That's good," she said. "Flexibility matters here." He didn't answer. At 12:03 a.m., his phone vibrated. "Mrs. Alvarez." Lucy's breathing was tight tonight. Used inhaler. She's asleep now. Evan closed his eyes. The room seemed to tilt, just slightly. Lucy was fine. Tonight. He wrote the timestamp down anyway. At 12:41 a.m., another message appeared. Conference room C, 5 minutes. Claire, HR. The room was small and windowless, lit by a single overhead panel that hummed faintly. Claire stood near the table, tablet resting against her arm like a barrier. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I'll be brief." "I'd appreciate that," Evan replied. "We've noticed you're under strain," Claire said. "New role, night hours, parenting." Evan said nothing. "We want to support you," she continued. "There are options. Schedule adjustments, day coverage, lower pay," Evan said. "Yes," Claire acknowledged, "but lower exposure." "To what?" Evan asked. Claire hesitated. "To risk and the people calling in," Evan said quietly. Claire looked down at her tablet. "Evan, initiating escalations has consequences. Reviews, leave, investigations." "I know. Investigations don't always end the way people hope." Evan met her gaze. "Is this advice or a warning?" Claire smiled faintly. "It's information." She paused, then added, "Your daughter's school is located in one of the zones you've been reviewing." The words landed gently and cut deep. When Evan returned to Station D, the screens felt farther away, as if a layer of glass had been added between him and the truth. At 1:26 a.m., another call. Welfare check. Zone 22 again. Dispatch delay, 119 seconds. Evan opened the raw logs. Slowly, deliberately, he pulled the last 90 days of data, careful to follow authorized paths, careful to let the system record every access. He refined the filters until the pattern sharpened into something undeniable. This wasn't efficiency, it was distribution. Time had been rationed. He saved the data set, recorded checksums, logged timestamps. At 1:58 a.m., his phone buzzed again. "Lucy, can't sleep. Can you talk?" Evan stepped into the alcove and called her. "I'm here," he said. "I had a bad dream," Lucy whispered. Someone was knocking, but the door didn't open. Evan leaned his forehead against the wall. "I'm here now," he said. "You're okay." She counted breaths with him. "Daddy," she asked, "is it bad if help comes slow?" "Yes," Evan said. "Sometimes it is." "Then why would anyone make it slow?" Evan swallowed. "Because they think no one will notice." Lucy was quiet for a moment. "You notice." "Yes," Evan said. "I do." When the call ended, Evan stood alone, the hum of the building settling into his bones. At 2:11 a.m., the time stared back at him from the corner of the screen. Another call arrived. Same zone, same delay, same green light. Evan closed his eyes briefly. He opened the compliance portal, scrolled past the warnings, stopped at the line he had been circling for days. Initiate internal audit review. This was the step no one took lightly. It didn't fix anything immediately. It only forced the system to look at itself in daylight. Administrative leave would follow. Unpaid. Rent was due in 12 days. Lucy's inhaler sat half full on the kitchen counter. Evan removed his hands from the keyboard and rested them on his thighs, grounding himself. He thought of Lucy counting breaths, of kitchen floors and waiting rooms, of people who trusted green lights they would never see. At 2:46 a.m., Evan opened a blank form, not to submit, not yet. He began filling it out carefully. Facts only. No adjectives, no conclusions. At 3:01 a.m., Evan understood something with absolute clarity. Staying quiet wasn't neutral, it was a choice. And tonight, silence had already taken too much time. He finished the last field and saved the draft. The button waited. Submit. Evan did not press it yet. But the decision had already been made. Some prices are paid in money, some in reputation, and some are paid in seconds you never get back. Evan Reed stared at the screen and prepared to pay the one that mattered. At 3:14 a.m., Evan clicked Submit. Nothing happened. No alarms, no flashing warnings, no dramatic confirmation. The screen refreshed quietly, as if he had done something trivial. A small box appeared in the corner. Audit request, received reference ID, IR0314 read, status pending review. That was it. One line of text, clean, neutral, indifferent, marking the moment Evan Reed stopped being an employee who noticed patterns and became a problem the system needed to manage. He stared at the reference ID until the numbers felt permanent. Then he documented. He wrote the time, the station, the files attached, the checksum values, the policy clause authorizing review. He saved copies in 3 places, labeled carefully, boringly, the way people did when they understood that proof disappeared first. At 3:22 a.m., the internal chat window blinked. Marcus. Call me. Evan read it. He did not answer, not yet. The audit pathway was designed for daylight, committee hours, scheduled meetings, people with coffee and distance. It wasn't supposed to move this fast, but Marcus had already seen it, which meant the system never slept. At 3:41 a.m., another call routed through. Medical assist, zone 22, delay, 109 seconds, still green, still acceptable. Evan dispatched the unit, logged the call, and felt the strange calm that came after making a decision you could not undo. At 4:03 a.m., Elaine appeared behind him. "You did something," she said. Evan kept his eyes on the screen. "I followed protocol." Elaine exhaled slowly. "You don't understand what you've triggered. I understand enough. This system doesn't respond well to embarrassment," she said. "It gets defensive. Then it should have listened sooner." Elaine looked at him for a long moment, then shook her head. "Be careful," she said, and walked away. At 4:26 a.m., Evan noticed his access icon flicker, then return. A glitch or a warning. At 4:58 a.m., his phone vibrated again. Marcus. This time Evan answered. "What did you do?" Marcus asked, voice tight. "I initiated an internal audit," Evan said evenly. A pause. Then, quieter. "You went outside operations. I used the designated pathway," Marcus sighed. "Withdraw it." "I can't." "You can clarify," Marcus pressed. "Say you misread variance data. Say you're not alleging harm. That would be a lie. It would be survival," Marcus said. "Evan, you have a daughter." "So do other people," Evan replied. Silence stretched across the line. "Finish your shift," Marcus said finally. "We'll talk at 7. The call ended. Morning crept in slowly, like it always did. Screens brightening, chairs filling, voices returning, as if the night had been an intermission. At 5:39 a.m., A notification appeared. Access update. User permissions restricted. Scope, live dispatch only. No explanation, no accusation, just a narrowing doorway. Evan took a screenshot and logged the time. This was how systems fought, not loudly, by making you smaller. At 6:12 a.m., an email arrived from compliance. Your audit request has been logged. Please refrain from additional data analysis while review is pending. Maintain standard operational duties. Polite. Final. At 7:02 a.m., Evan logged out. At 7:06, he was called to conference room B. This time, the head seat was occupied. A man Evan didn't recognize sat there in a tailored suit, a thin folder placed neatly in front of him. Claire sat to his right, Marcus to his left. Elaine stood near the door, arms folded. "Mr. Reed," the man said, standing. "Dorian Kessler, Risk and Compliance Liaison." Evan sat. "We've reviewed your submission," Dorian continued. "Your documentation is thorough." Evan said nothing. "However," Dorian added, "escalations of this nature create operational instability. Delayed responses create harm," Evan replied. Dorian's expression didn't change. "Our priority is stability." "For whom?" Evan asked. Claire cleared her throat. "Evan, let's keep this constructive." Dorian slid a paper across the table. "Administrative leave, pending review." Evan scanned the first line. "Paid?" he asked. Dorian hesitated. "Just long enough." "Unpaid. Standard practice." Evan's chest tightened. "How long?" "Days," Dorian said. "Possibly weeks." "Rent in 12 days. Lucy's inhaler, groceries, all balanced on a single signature." "This isn't punishment," Claire said softly. "It's procedure." Evan looked up. "So was the delay." Silence. "You have options," Dorian said. "Cooperate quietly or escalate beyond internal channels." "You mean the city oversight hotline," Evan said. Dorian didn't deny it. Marcus leaned forward, voice tired. "Don't burn your life down." Evan thought of Lucy's voice in the dark. "You notice." "I'll cooperate," Evan said. "I'll follow every rule." Dorian nodded, satisfied. "But I won't lie," Evan added. "And I won't pretend this is harmless." Dorian's eyes narrowed slightly. "Noted." The meeting ended without raised voices. That was the cruelest part. On the train home, Evan watched the city wake. Schools opening, offices filling, people buying coffee as if time were guaranteed. At home, Lucy ran to him. "Daddy," she said, "did you help anyone?" Evan knelt, holding her shoulders. "I tried," he said honestly, "and I'm still trying." Lucy studied his face, then nodded. "Okay," she said, "then don't stop." Evan held her close. Somewhere in the system, IR0314 Reed waited in a queue, pending, like a door that had finally been knocked on, hard enough that someone would have to answer. And next, the question wasn't whether the system would respond. It was how much it would cost before it did. Administrative leave felt nothing like rest. The first morning, Evan woke without an alarm. The silence pressed in from all sides. No dashboards, no timers counting down, no green lights promising everything was fine. Just daylight leaking through thin curtains and the quiet certainty that nothing was waiting for him, except consequences. Rent in 10 days. The inhaler on the kitchen counter half full. His email held one subject line that did not change. IR0314 Reed, pending review. Evan walked Lucy to school at 8:40 a.m. She skipped along the sidewalk, talking about a poster she wanted to make for class. He nodded at the right moments, smiled when she smiled, and stood by the fence after the bell rang, watching the gate close. Time, he thought, always closed gates. At 11:17 a.m., his phone rang. "Mr. Reed?" a woman asked. "This is Lila Moreno with the City Oversight Review Office." Evan sat down at the kitchen table. "Yes." "I'm calling to confirm receipt of your audit request," Lila said. "We're assessing scope. I need to ask, do you believe harm has already occurred?" Evan closed his eyes. "I believe it has," he said carefully. "I just don't have names yet." There was a pause, long enough to matter. "Preserve all records," Lila said. "We'll be in touch." The line went dead. Evan opened his laptop. He did not pull new data. He did not violate restrictions. He worked only with what he already had. Raw logs saved before access narrowed, timestamps captured cleanly, policy documents archived. He ran the numbers again, slower this time. Then he saw it. A welfare check from 3 nights earlier. Zone 14. 02:41 a.m. Dispatch delay, 127 seconds. Outcome note. Patient found unresponsive. Pronounced on scene. Evan's fingers hovered over the trackpad. He clicked. An address loaded. 6 blocks from Lucy's school. A name followed, tucked low in the report, like an afterthought. Ruth Caldwell, age 68. The room tilted. This wasn't variance. This wasn't optimization. This was a person who had waited. At 2:12 p.m., Evan put on his jacket and walked. The building was a narrow brick walk-up, tired and leaning inward. A small memorial rested by the steps, flowers gone soft. A candle burned down to wax. A handwritten card taped crookedly to the doorframe. Evan stood across the street. He did not approach. He imagined a knock that came too late. A door opened to quiet. The space where seconds should have been. Time had a name now. At 3:04 p.m., his phone rang again. Marcus. "You shouldn't be doing this," Marcus said without greeting. "I'm not at the center," Evan replied. "That's not what I mean." Marcus lowered his voice. "Oversight is asking for raw logs." "They should. They're looking for causation," Marcus said, "not correlation." "They'll find it," Evan said, a breath on the line. "Evan, there was a death." "I know." Silence. "It's being classified as within protocol," Marcus added. "So was my wife," Evan said. Marcus swallowed. "You're putting faces on data. Once you do that, no one stays clean." Evan looked at the memorial again. "People were never clean," he said. "They were just unnamed." He ended the call. Lucy came home quiet. She dropped her backpack and sat at the table without speaking. "Everything okay?" Evan asked. She nodded, then shook her head. "Someone's grandma died," she said. "They talked about it in class." Evan's chest tightened. "Did they say her name?" Lucy shrugged. "I think it was Miss Ruth." Evan reached across the table and took her hand. "Daddy," Lucy asked, "did anyone help her?" Evan closed his eyes. "Someone tried," he said. "Was it you?" Evan hesitated, then chose the truth. "Yes, but I was late." Lucy frowned. "But you noticed." "Yes." "That matters," she said, more statement than question. That night, after Lucy fell asleep, Evan opened the folder again. He added a name, an address, a measured distance, dispatch time to arrival, mapped against delay. No adjectives, no blame, only facts. At 11:58 p.m., Evan wrote a single email. Subject, Supplemental Documentation, IR 0314 read. I have identified a case within the audit window where delayed dispatch correlates with a fatal outcome. Attached, timestamps, zone data, and the public incident report. No conjecture, no conclusions, only documentation. He hovered over the send button. Rent, inhaler, leave. He pressed send. Across the city, a system that had learned to hide behind averages would wake up to a name. Evan closed the laptop and sat in the dark. He did not feel vindicated. He felt exposed. But beneath it, something steadier took shape. If time could be taken, it could be given back. And Evan Reed had just returned a piece of it, with interest. The email did not break the city. It did something worse. It made the city pause. At 6:12 a.m., Lila Moreno opened Evan Reed's message and did not forward it immediately. She read it twice, then printed it. She placed the pages face down on her desk and stared at the ceiling for a long moment, counting breaths the way she'd learned to do when the consequences of a decision began to outweigh the comfort of delay. By 6:41 a.m., a preservation order was issued. No announcements, no press, just a quiet instruction that froze configuration changes across the emergency response system. At 7:08, compliance confirmed receipt. At 7:19, legal requested scope clarification. At 7:36, risk asked for a meeting. The system had begun to speak back. Not in outrage, but in procedure. Evan learned none of this right away. He was making Lucy breakfast when his phone buzzed repeatedly on the counter. Missed calls, unknown numbers. A single text from Marcus that read, "They saw it." Evan closed his eyes. At 8:04 a.m., Lucy sat at the table swinging her legs, reading aloud from a book she loved enough to memorize. Evan nodded at the right moments, smiled when she laughed, and walked her to school with a weight in his chest that didn't lift until the bell rang. Then his phone rang again. "Mr. Reed," Lila said, "we received your supplemental documentation." "Yes." "There's been a policy suspension," she continued. "Temporary. Pending review." "Which policy?" "The zone-based priority modifiers." Evan stopped walking. "All of them?" "Yes." For a moment, the city noise around him felt distant. Cars passed. A bus sighed at the curb. Time moved. "That matters," Evan said. "Yes," Lila replied. "It does." At 9:12 a.m., the Oversight Review Office convened an emergency session. No cameras, no aides, just a long table and the kind of silence that meant everyone understood the stakes. "They'll say it's correlation," Legal said. "It's correlation with consequence," Lila replied, sliding the printout forward. "And now there's a name." Risk frowned. "This will cost money." Lila nodded. "Funerals cost more." At 9:44, authority was granted for an independent audit. At 10:01, a memo went out. Temporary suspension. Effective immediately rationale. Pending independent review. The language was careful. Temporary. Pending. But the switches flipped. Across the city, seconds shifted back. Evan's phone rang again. Marcus this time. "They turned it off," Marcus said, breathless. "All of it." "That's good," Evan replied. "It's big," Marcus said. "And they're asking about you." "I didn't ask for that." "I know," Marcus said. "That's why it's happening." At noon, a statement was released. Quiet, clinical, easy to overlook if you didn't know what to read for. "The city has initiated an independent review of emergency response prioritization practices following identification of potential disproportionate impacts." No names, no blame. But the phones didn't stop ringing. By early afternoon, advocacy groups requested data access. By mid-afternoon, council offices asked for briefings. By late afternoon, someone leaked the appendix. At 3:18 p.m., the mayor read Evan Reed's name for the first time. "Who is he?" she asked. "A night shift operator," her chief of staff replied. "Single father, on administrative leave." The mayor scanned the summary again. "He did this by the book?" "Yes." She leaned back. "Then bring him in." The chief of staff shook his head. "He won't come downtown." "Why not?" "He didn't ask for attention, and he has a daughter." The mayor was quiet for a long moment. "Then I'll go to him." The chief of staff hesitated. "Ma'am." "Arrange it," she said. She arrived without cameras, without speeches. She climbed the stairs of Evan's building herself. Lucy opened the door. "Yes?" Lucy asked. The mayor crouched slightly. "Hello, is your dad home?" Lucy studied her. "Are you here to listen?" "Yes," the mayor said. Lucy stepped aside. "Then come in." They sat at the small kitchen table, Evan, the mayor, and one aide who took no notes. Evan told the story the same way he had written it. Times, zones, policy language, one name. He did not raise his voice. He did not ask for anything. When he finished, the mayor looked down at the table. "I signed off on performance targets," she said quietly. "I never saw the appendix." Evan nodded. "Most people don't." "We're changing it," she said. "Publicly, permanently." Evan met her gaze. "That will upset people." "Yes," she said, "but it will help others." She stood to leave, then paused at the door. "What about your job?" "I don't need a promotion," Evan said. "I need the system to listen." The mayor nodded. "We'll do both." After she left, Lucy tugged Evan's sleeve. "Did she listen?" Lucy asked. "Yes," Evan said. Lucy smiled. "Good." That night, the city ran under a different set of rules. Nothing miraculous. Just fairer. Seconds were no longer reassigned in the dark. Names no longer disappeared into averages. And Evan Reed, sitting at his kitchen table long after Lucy fell asleep, felt the weight on his chest lift. Not because the fight was over, but because the door had finally opened. The city did not become kinder. It became louder. By morning, the suspension of the priority modifiers was no longer a footnote buried in internal memos. It was a headline that didn't quite know how to describe itself. City quietly adjusts emergency response policy after review. The word quietly did a lot of work. Phones rang in offices that had not rung in years. Emails multiplied. Statements were drafted, softened, revised, and softened again. People argued over language the way they always did, when consequences arrived faster than explanations. Evan did not read any of it. He was at the grocery store, standing in the aisle, calculating what could wait. Milk, yes. Fruit, maybe. The inhaler refill, non-negotiable. His phone buzzed. Marcus. They're asking about you, Marcus said. Evan stared at the price label on a box of cereal. Who is they today? Everyone, Marcus replied. Council, oversight, advocacy groups, people who have never worked a night shift in their lives. Evan exhaled. I didn't ask for attention. I know, Marcus said. That's why they trust you. There was a pause. You're not getting fired, Marcus added. Evan closed his eyes. Am I getting paid? Another pause, longer. Not yet, Marcus said. Evan nodded to himself. Okay. He paid and walked home, the plastic handles biting into his palms. At noon, an email arrived, not from press, not from HR. A meeting invite, subject, Emergency Response Reform, working session. Attendees, Mayor's Office, Oversight, Legal, Operations, note. Attendance requested, Evan Reed requested, not required. Evan stared at the screen. Lucy came home from school moments later, dropping her backpack with a thud. Daddy, she said, eyes bright, they talked about you. Evan froze. Who did? My teacher, Lucy said. She said someone helped the city listen better. Evan knelt. Did she say my name? Lucy shook her head. No, but I knew. She studied him. Are you in trouble? Evan considered the unpaid leave, the meetings, the way the pressure had changed shape instead of disappearing. Yes, he said honestly. A little. Lucy nodded, as if this fit neatly into her understanding of the world. That's okay. If you need me to be quiet, I can. Evan smiled despite himself. I don't need quiet. I need you. That evening, the doorbell rang. It wasn't the mayor this time. A man in his 50s stood outside, well-dressed but not polished, holding a thin folder like something fragile. Mr. Reed, he said. Thomas Avery, Deputy Director, Emergency Services Reform Task Group. That's a long title, Evan said. Avery smiled faintly. We're still arguing about it. They sat at the kitchen table again. Lucy lingered in the hallway, pretending not to listen. We're creating a new role, Avery said. Independent, embedded, but separate. Evan waited. You'd review response policies, Avery continued. Audit changes before they go live. Flag disproportionate impacts before they become invisible. So, Evan said, to notice. Yes, Avery replied. Officially. And who would I report to? Oversight, Avery said, with a protected line to the mayor's office. Evan leaned back. That sounds like a job no one applies for. Avery nodded. No one has. What about pay? Evan asked. Enough, Avery said, and your leave would be converted to paid, retroactive. Evan felt something loosen in his chest. And protections? Written, enforceable, not perfect. Evan looked toward the hallway. Lucy's eyes met his for a brief second before she ducked away. Why me? Evan asked. Avery met his gaze. Because you didn't ask for this job, he said. And because you followed the rules even when the rules were the problem. Evan was quiet. I'm not a reformer, he said finally. I don't want a platform. Good, Avery replied. We're not offering one. He slid a single page across the table. Interim appointment. 90 days. Try it, Avery said. If it doesn't work, you walk away. Lucy stepped into the room then, holding her stuffed fox. Are you helping the listening? She asked Avery. Avery blinked, surprised. We're trying. Lucy nodded. He's good at that. Avery stood to leave. At the door, he paused. People are angry, he said. Some say we moved too fast. Others say we didn't move fast enough. Evan nodded. That usually means it's right, Avery smiled. I think so too. After the door closed, Evan sat staring at the page. Lucy climbed into his lap. Is it a good job? She asked. Evan thought of night shifts and seconds and names that refused to stay buried. It's not easy, he said, and it won't make everyone happy. Lucy wrapped her arms around his neck. That's okay. You don't have to make everyone happy. Just the people who are waiting. Evan held her close. Outside, the city argued. Inside, a decision settled. Not as victory, but as responsibility. The kind no one applies for. The kind that finds you when you decide not to look away. The city learned how to talk about seconds. That was the strangest part. Not the outrage, not the panels or the op-eds or the carefully worded statements that tried to make delay sound like a weather pattern instead of a choice. The strange part was how quickly people learned the language once it had been named, how easily they spoke about response time, the way they once spoke about budgets. Evan Reed did not join the debate. He showed up. The interim appointment came with no ceremony, no announcement, just a badge that opened doors and a calendar that filled itself. Meetings stacked end to end. Drafts arrived late and left early. People spoke carefully, testing words before releasing them into the room. Evan listened. He asked where numbers came from. He asked what assumptions hid behind averages. He asked who waited longer if a line moved 2 places to the left. Some rooms went quiet when he spoke. Others grew tense. A few, very few, grew honest. He learned quickly that reform did not arrive as a wave. It arrived as friction, as small resistances that forced a system to slow down and feel its own weight. He learned that the people most uncomfortable were not the ones who had caused harm, but the ones who had learned to live beside it without naming it. Evan kept naming it. At night, after Lucy fell asleep, he sat at the kitchen table with documents spread in careful piles. He traced decisions backward, through edits and approvals and softened language that had stripped intent down to something polite and harmless. He restored words. Delay, disproportionate, harm, not as accusations, as facts. The changes moved forward line by line. The zone-based modifiers were removed permanently. A public dashboard replaced the old one, less comforting, more honest. It showed response times by neighborhood without smoothing them into reassurance. People noticed, people complained, and people arrived sooner. Evan's 90-day appointment stretched into 120, then 180. No one said the word permanent. No one needed to. He never asked what came next. He let the work answer. On a bright Thursday morning, Lucy stood in front of her class holding a poster board almost as tall as she was. Construction paper arrows pointed from one box to another. At the top, written in careful marker, was a title she had practiced all week: How Listening Works. Evan sat in the back of the classroom, knees angled awkwardly, trying not to draw attention. Lucy took a breath. When someone needs help, she began, they tell someone. That person has to hear them, and then they have to hurry. She pointed to the first box. Sometimes people hear, Lucy continued, but they don't hurry. That's when waiting gets scary. The room was quiet. Lucy moved to the last box. Listening means you don't decide if someone matters before you answer. A few children nodded. One raised a hand, then lowered it again. Evan felt something that settled in his chest, not pride exactly, but recognition. The sense that a circle had closed without being forced. After school, Lucy ran to him, hair loose from its tie. "Did I do it right?" she asked. "You did it perfectly," Evan said. "Daddy," she said as they walked home, "are you still helping the listening?" "Yes," Evan replied. Lucy nodded, satisfied. "Good. People still knock." That night, an email arrived with no subject line, one attachment, a finalized policy document with tracked changes accepted. Evan's name appeared near the end, not as author, but as reviewer, approved, effective immediately. Evan closed the laptop and leaned back. Outside, the city hummed, cars passing, sirens distant but moving, not lingering. He thought of Ruth Caldwell, of a door that had opened too late, of a name that had refused to stay buried inside averages. Justice, he had learned, was not a balance restored. It was a tension sustained. Months later, Evan volunteered to observe a night shift, not because anyone asked, but because he wanted to remember. The room felt familiar. Dim lights, steady hum, screens glowing. The dashboard was green again, not perfect, honest. A call came in from a familiar zone. Dispatch time, shorter, not miraculous, just better. Evan watched the unit roll, watched the seconds move forward without being quietly reassigned. He wrote nothing down. He did not need to. When he left before dawn, the sky was pale and steady. The city looked ordinary, which felt like a kind of victory. At home, Lucy was already awake, eating cereal and reading. "Daddy?" she asked without looking up. "Did anyone need help?" "Yes," Evan said. "And did someone listen?" Evan paused. He thought of committees and clauses and small decisions made visible, of a system that still wasn't kind, but was learning. "Yes," he said finally. Someone listened. Lucy smiled. That was enough. The noise would return. New pressures, new optimizations, new reasons to hurry less. Evan knew that now. The work would never be finished. But he also knew this. When someone knocked, the door would open faster than it had before. And sometimes that was the only legacy that mattered.